Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Later in the show, we'll speak with Latanya Naylor of Parent Villages about their upcoming Education Matters brunch this Saturday.
And two women writers of very different subjects. We'll hear about Jen Acker's latest novel, Surrender, for which the launch party is tonight at Odyssey Books in South Hadley, and with Anna McGill, who'll give a talk on writing for video games at her alma mater, Smith College, tomorrow evening.
But first, we were all rocked by the news that Hampshire College will be closing at the end of this year.
To gain some insight about the campus and its impacts, we went straight to our resident astronomer and one-time professor of the institution, Salman Hamid.
Formerly Hampshire College astronomer Dr. Salman Hamid, Mr. Universe. We don't usually have you on Tuesdays, but the big news today, of course, is that Hampshire College has announced that it will be closing at the end of the year 2026. The Boston Globe story from our very own Brooke Hauser in the Valley here. Heartbreaking reality. Hampshire College announces transition to closure. You have been a professor at Hampshire College over the years, and I know it's early and it's raw, but we thought we would just get your reaction to this announcement today.
Yes, I mean, I've been associated with Hampshire for over 20 years. It's a shock to the system, even though this time it looked like that the conditions were getting to the level where this might happen. Nevertheless, it is still a huge shock, especially at a time where I genuinely believe that a place like Hampshire is needed in a world like this, not just in terms of injustices and these type of things happening in the world, but also how to think about challenges like AI. People who are affiliated with Hampshire, for us, it's a loss, but also higher education. I think it needs Hampshire, and I think it's a loss for higher education.
I wouldn't disagree.
Yeah, the pedagogy of what Hampshire stands for is really interesting. Tell us what drew you to that as an astronomer. You know, the sciences are not necessarily something that people always associate with the liberal arts and the kind of way that Hampshire operates where, you know, a gradeless system and you're going to build your own majors. Talk about what drew you as a scientist to want to teach at Hampshire.
Right. So, I mean, normally what we hear often is Ken Burns, which, of course, like, you know, one of our more distinguished alum, Napita Guion, are like, you know, a bunch of people who are in the arts or film industry and things like that. But we also have a real good pedigree in the sciences as well, including, for example, Gary Marcus, who, in fact, when we are talking about artificial intelligence, one of the major critics of large language models is him, Gary Marcus. So, for me, I was interested in the intersection of science and social sciences and humanities. And really, Hampshire was one of those places which did not have disciplinary boundaries, where you can explore topics pretty much where your intellectual pursuits take you. And I was, on top of that, I was lucky enough to have an endowed position, which was called Integrated Science and Humanities, which allowed me to explore intersections of how science interact with society. And I ended up working on topics like how in Muslim societies, people think about science and biological evolution, but also some interests that I currently pursue as well in terms of the ethical issues regarding the human settlements on the moon. Mm-hmm. But these type of things, Hampshire was a special place because you can explore these interdisciplinary boundaries without any barriers. If I was going to teach a class and I taught a class, for example, on aliens, like, you know, the class was about how society over the period of time have thought about the topic of extraterrestrials from psychology, from history, from astronomy, from religion. I could teach it. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't just, oh, you have to fight against the system, but these type of interdisciplinary classes were, in fact, encouraged. So for me, that was a big deal. And I was in the School of Cognitive Science, which was one of the first schools when it was founded on that topic back in the 1980s. I started in 2005, and it was incredible to have, for example, the office right next to me was a philosopher. Right across from a hall was a linguist. There was an evolutionary biologist next to him. You had media person in there. So you had such an amazingly rich environment. And I still remember, especially when I started, like, you know, that our lunch, when oftentimes our faculty would go to lunch together, and that was one of the most stimulating experiences. And oftentimes, classes that we would co-teach emerged from that because it was pretty easy to co-teach at Hampshire. It was literally like, and I'm not exaggerating, you're having lunch and you're like, oh, you're having a really great conversation, say, for example, with a philosopher, and you go like, hey, next semester, do you want to co-teach a course? Maybe we can actually bring these perspectives in together. They're like, sure. And all you have to do is next semester, there is no bureaucracy. It's not like, oh, it's going to take a year and a half. We'll need approval from the Senate and all of that stuff. No, next semester, you are co-teaching. And it wasn't a penalty to co-teach. It was strongly encouraged. And to be fair, that is how I learned most of my stuff, because when you're co-teaching with somebody who actually know what they are talking about, I am not an interloper. I'm not sort of like trying to interpret, let me read my own philosophy and interpret. I'm not trained in there, or I'm not trained in evolutionary biology, but somebody who is actually co-teaching with you, and they're bringing resources or sources for that, which are primary, and they know in their field what is the best thing. So that combination was great. And then the students. I mean, Hampshire students, there was a range of students because, again, we don't have grades, we give evaluations, but the best students were off the charts. And having them in the class, the kind of interactions you would get. I know my colleagues in the 5 colleges, they often actually love having Hampshire students because you don't have a problem of them not contributing to the discussion, because they would. In fact, we had the opposite problem of how to control it. And second, they would not be shy in raising controversial issues, opinions that, others people think, should we bring it up? Because they are not worried about the grade in the first place. They are like, okay, this is my opinion, I'm going to say that. These are the type of things, and I'm just listing a couple, that makes Hampshire, or that made Hampshire, an amazing place. And I think we are right now talking about the loss, but I also want to celebrate the time that Hampshire College has been around. And in some ways, Hampshire is going to live through all of us, through the students, through faculty, through staff, and through the 5 colleges. It is part of this community. So yes, it is a great loss. We are still processing it. But I also think in some ways, Hampshire is also going to stay alive through the people that were part of it. And I owe an incredible debt to whatever I've done, whatever I've contributed, because it has been through the amazing intellectual community built by not just faculty, but by staff and students in particular. I mean, again, this is one of those things I cannot stress enough, that students interacted with us a lot, and they actually built this community together with others. So that is going to be a debt that I will always carry with me.
I feel like this loss is a microcosm of a bigger set of shift in perspective and wants on the American public. And we're not just talking liberal arts, which are kind of under threat in terms of higher education, which itself is kind of under threat at this moment. But the idea of like that interconnection and that self-driven curiosity that Hampshire really, really encouraged, we're going to feel that more than I think people realize.
I think so. I mean, I think if we are going to mourn something, and I would say, I think that is a valid point, and not just a valid point, but higher education itself is under a lot of stress. And a lot of that stress comes not just from outside, but from within as well. I mean, the kind of changes to academia over the last several decades. Again, I would go back to this point that one of the ethos of Hampshire has been that it's an experimenting college, and it responds to changes. It responds to things. And I do hold a hope in that direction, because I think the kind of spirit that Hampshire embodied, I think we need that kind of spirit. It's not going to be in the form of Hampshire right now, but I think Hampshire was a product of the 60s. Those were turbulent times, and I think we are right now facing a deeply turbulent time, this time even more so all around the world. I think for humanity's sake, and also for our sanity's sake, I'm really hopeful that something like Hampshire, with that type of ethos, with that type of thing, is going to come out. Is it going to be exactly like that as a college form? I don't know. But I think we need it in order to survive. Just like the way Hampshire was founded, it played its part in the last 50 years or 55 years. And that's the reason why I don't want to take it just in the negative light. I mean, I think Hampshire has contributed a lot to the world, to the US, and to the world. And I think that type of ethos, because its spirit exists and people also know how Hampshire worked, I think something like this will come about in this darkness, I would say. And I think Hampshire can, or the spirit of Hampshire can be still light.
Well, this is just a breaking story today, the notion that Hampshire College is going to close at the end of 2026. You, though, Salman Hamid, we were waiting to reveal this anyway, are soon to be renamed on the show, five-college astronomer, Dr. Salman Hamid, Mr. Universe. So you personally are secure going forward, as well as with your Kainat Studios that you are working with. And we'll follow this story until the actual closure of Hampshire at the end of 26. Meanwhile, we will prepare ourselves to lay Shaggy to rest in the Scooby-Doo analogy and transition back from WFCR 5 College Radio to our original name, WFCR 4 College Radio, which is true. The Scooby-Doo analogy, not true. It is apocryphal. But still.
And we will also have to figure out for college astronomer or not. So we will actually.
Oh, that's
have to
true.
deal with
I didn't
that
even think
too.
of it. Maybe we could raise another college up into the 5 college. We got plenty around here. Why not? Aren't we like the 15 college area?
Yeah, but
Or just go with the acronym FCAD, 5, 4. That's the whole wonderful thing about using just an F.
We love the F. Well, Mr. Universe, we will talk again about astronomy next week. I wish we had better news, and we're talking about Artemis too, but this is thank you for sharing your feelings and your insights on this breaking story today.
Thank you very much.
Despite Hampshire's closing, there's still a lot of education going on in the area, including the work of Parent Villages, which we'll discuss with Latanya Monroe-Naylor.
And with Amherst College's Jen Acker, her latest novel just released today, we'll talk about Surrender as she readies for the book's launch party tonight.
Up next, however, we head to Northampton, where a Smith alum takes the dream she built there and shows the current students how to do it too. Anna McGill joins us to talk about writing for video games.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the Handle Factory Community Clay Studio in Shelburne Falls, part of the Asparagus Valley Pottery Trail, a tour of 8 studios featuring 30 potters, April 25th and 26th. AsparagusValleyPotteryTrail.com.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. Tomorrow, April 15th, the Smith College campus hosts the talk, Writing for Video Games. It's not just for bips and boops anymore, with an alum who's made a fun impact on the field.
Anna McGill is an award-winning game writer and industry veteran with experience writing primarily for modern AAA games. In her nearly 2 decades of game development, Anna has worked for some of the top studios around the world, such as Ubisoft, Arcane, Remedy, and Square Enix.
A longtime advocate for marginalized voices in games, Anna provides resources and advice to aspiring writers through her website. She's worked on Fable, Cyberpunk 2, Control, Guild Wars 2, Dishonored, and a whole lot of other games you and or your children may have played over the course of the 20 years that she's been in gaming, and she will be back at her alma mater at Smith tomorrow. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to have a chat with you.
This is such a fun thing, and I saw it kind of accidentally and was like, oh, somebody's coming to talk about narrative in video games. This is awesome.
I'm glad you knew what it was, because so many people don't. They're like, that's where the title of the talk comes from. It's like, oh, so you write the beeps and the boops in the game, huh? Yeah.
Well, talk about the lack of beeps and boops and what you're bringing story-wise. When you were at Smith, I know that there, and we know the person who's there in the sort of the video game department at Smith, but did that exist while you were there?
None of that existed. I graduated from Smith in 2008, so I started there in 2004, and it was just a very different landscape completely for video games and for schools teaching video games. There wasn't even such a thing as being able to go to school to learn how to be a game writer. So I went to Smith and sort of cobbled together my own game writing degree. But yeah, I heard they have an IGDA chapter at Smith now, which is an International Game Developers Association chapter. They didn't have that when I was there. So they've come a long way in their recognition of game. My professors treated my dream of being a game writer with this sort of benign bafflement most of the time. But we're very supportive.
I'm pointing at myself because my degree is in film scoring, but initially I wanted to do game scoring. And I couldn't find any math majors who were doing computing at Kenyon who would collaborate with me. The thing about game scoring that I found really fascinating is that, like, not only do you have to come up with motif, but it has to be repeatable in a way that doesn't annoy people. And I think that came about around the same time that, like, narrative starts really exploding in games as, like, the primary thing people are going towards, not just necessarily, like, shooting folks or shooting targets or jumping on things.
What was the first game that made you have the dream that, like, I want to write the stories that are going to be behind these games that people play?
The first game that made me make that connection between games and writing and literature was Myst.
Same. I quit. I basically quit high school to play Myst all the time.
I still get angry about Riven. Like, I'm still mad about it all these years later. That final fire dome marble puzzle thing. These were the days when you couldn't go just like look it up online. Like there weren't the answers. You had to go down to your bookstore and find like a Prima's guide somewhere if they were lucky enough to like carry that, and then look at the answer and try to remember it all the way back home. Because couldn't afford to buy it. But that was the first one. They had the linking books that opened up, and then you would enter them and go into the world. And I'm just like, you know, and they were actually fairly literary. They had these sort of like live action cutscenes that were like little films, and like it just all came together for me. But I didn't actually have the dream of doing it myself, of thinking this is something I could do, until I was playing a game one night that had super bad dialogue. Like I don't want to say the name of the game because I know the person who wrote it. And there's a reason why it's bad, right? You know, there are a lot of constraints on game writing. But I was playing it and I thought I could write something this bad. And like it seemed such an attainable goal that it actually made me think I could do it.
Was it Tim Curry and Wing Commander bad?
Yes, it was. It was Jill, you, the master of unlocking, should take this key bad. Yes.
Oh.
It was that bad.
It was a bad radio host that made me think I should get into radio too at the same time, by the way.
See?
Sometimes you feel like I can fail better than that person.
Yep.
Or at least as badly as they're failing, right?
And that is how we're trying to inspire the next generation with Anna McGill, who is a 2000.
Yeah, you know, y'all, come on, you could write games as bad as mine.
And writing for video games, not just beeps and boops anymore, is happening at Smith College at 5 o'clock tomorrow, April 15th. I'm assuming it's mostly for the Smith folks, but are the public invited to this too if they're interested in learning what it takes to write a game?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I hope they come. There's a pretty vibrant gaming community in this area now, so in the Pioneer Valley, so yeah.
There's been 2 game jams this past year.
I mean, when I moved to Northampton to go to Smith, there was one video game company in town, like one. And like now there's this whole ecosystem. It's great.
Talk about the first video game that you got to write the story for.
I would say Dishonored: Death of the Outsider was the one I really got to write the whole like first story for. I wrote the first draft of the entire screenplay for the game. I'd worked on a lot of games as a game writer before that, but that's the first one that I really got to do the whole thing from, you know, start to finish. This one was very near and dear to my heart. It had Billy Lurk in it, who was a reformed assassin who still somehow was killing people. But she set out to kill a god. She blamed the outsider for all the terrible things happening in the world, and she set out to end his reign of terror and to bring justice to the world, enlisted her old friend Dowd and went off to kill a god. And it was an absolute delight to work on that project with that team of people. It was Saskia Duval, Hazel Monforton, Sophie Mallinson. So it was our all-girl team just killing it. And it was just it was a labor of love. And it's still one of my proudest moments.
Well, speaking of having an all-girl team, we were just talking with our resident Merriam-Webster editor about the suffix gate. And Gamergate is a very legendary moment in the world of video games. I'm imagining, even though 2008 to me seems like it was yesterday, that maybe the landscape has changed somewhat when it comes to video games and women's roles in video games. Tell us about your journey through that amidst the time of Gamergate.
As the ripples continue to be felt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not commonly known, but I was very Gamergate adjacent. Obviously, as a fairly high profile woman in tech at the time, I was sort of there on the forefront. Brianna Wu had just, optioned 2 of my visual novels, and we were going to make those into games. And so I was working with her, and she was, of course, right in the middle of it. So I sort of got the splash damage from the harassment that she was receiving. It was a tough time, and it was very hard because, we use these social media channels to connect and to build community. And it had been a really important part of my career and my life as a woman in games, connecting with fans, connecting with other women in games, connecting with studios. And suddenly it was a place of harassment and, this constant assault on your psyche when you were just there trying to talk about fun video games with people. And I think we know now, I think there's been a lot of evidence that this was indeed a political operation, by paid actors in other states, and that this was to further a far-right agenda. But at the time, it just felt like, why do you hate the people making your games so much? Why can't we all just enjoy our games together? And I had felt like we'd made a lot of progress from that point. Like, things did get better. I think the industry recovered somewhat from it, and women were still making games like we have always made games. But then there was recently a Gamergate 2, it got revived. And again, a lot of people that I'm close to were caught up in the middle of that. And it's really unfortunate. I think there was absolutely a racial aspect to this one as well, and not just sexism. And it was just a really sad thing to see what happened to Sweet Baby, because I think Kim Belair and her team are extremely talented. And it's unfortunate, but I think that just goes to show that element is still there. There's always going to be people who feel strongly about women and people of color making games, and you just can't let them get you down, and keep making what you believe in and the art that you like, and find people in your community who share your interests, and just make the best games and the best art that you can.
The irony, of course, being that without people of color and women, we probably wouldn't have computers in the first place.
Yeah.
But, we don't have to bring that up.
Some of them were literally called computers before we had machines that did such a thing.
Yeah, that history gets erased, though, right? Sometimes very deliberately. And so I think that there are often at the heart of these movements some really sad and lonely people who are finding community there, and who don't really believe some of these things, but who are absolutely being manipulated by, as we mentioned, these are operations by states trying to further agendas. And it really kind of makes me sad that they are actually depriving themselves of a community that would welcome them if they just came to it with an open mind and an open heart. It's very sad.
We're speaking with Smith College alumna Anna McGill, who will return to Smith College tomorrow, April 15th, to host the talk, Writing for Video Games. It's not just for bips and boops anymore. I think a lot of people are recognizing that now, even if they don't play games themselves, seeing how many games have now transcended to the world of television and decorated television with shows like The Last of Us and Fallout. What's your take on the
adaptations?
Yeah, on television taking over these stories that you're writing so hard to get people to interact with in a gaming platform?
There's a cultural conversation taking place, and I think it's all good, right? That games are doing such innovative quality work that now you have these prestige television shows like looking to us for their ideas and adapting our work. I think it's a real tribute to how much game stories have improved and how the amazing work that we're doing. I mean, Super Mario Galaxy is one of the top films in the world right now. It just came out. That's based on a video game. I don't know if you've seen the show Severance.
Yeah. Is that a video game?
The first time. It's not, but I am pretty sure that the people who made Severance have played my game Control, because the parallels between it are so striking that there's just no way they didn't.
I can't wait for the lawsuit.
Yeah, no. I mean, inspired by, right? Like, we were inspired by Jeff Vandermeer's Annihilation, right?
Right.
He's not going to sue us. So, I think it's important to talk about that cultural conversation, because this is how it should be. You do get inspired by the work that other people do. And as long as you're putting your own stamp on it and transcending the original and doing your own thing with it, I don't think there's a problem.
That's a good attitude
In
to
a
have.
word,
And that's a
yeah.
great show, too. I love Severance. It's one of my favorite shows going right now.
It is so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is just so particularly my cup of tea that like I just savor it. Yeah.
You literally wrote the story of it, so it makes perfect sense that you would like it.
Me and a team of very talented people. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite type of video game to write for, and or is there one that is really that you discovered is just too hard at this moment to write for?
I think when I was writing for Dishonored and then for Control, like that's when I sort of hit the oh, this is my thing. I hit my groove, and I discovered the thing that really sort of lights me up, and that, as it turns out, I'm not that bad at. So these very highly cinematic, story-driven games with really well-developed characters that you can easily make into a film and can make it into a TV show. Those are the things that I specialize in and that I really love, because I like digging into the psychology of why people do things and presenting them with impossible choices and making the player have to really, make a wrenching decision about which way they're going to go and what is the right thing to do. Like I really enjoy that. What would I not want to do right now? I've written some children's games. Like I worked on Littlest Pet Shop, and I wrote
Oh my gosh.
the newspaper for that. It was one of the very first games I worked on. Writing the newspaper for it, I would have to listen to that sort of saccharine, like Littlest Pet Shop sound, like, and get it in my head, and then write in that voice for the newspaper. And I don't think I could do that. I just don't think I could do it anymore. It's too hard.
We were saying that when you were at Smith, there was no course of study for learning how to write for video games. Are there things that you can only get away with in writing for a video game that you couldn't get away with if you wanted to turn it into a book or a television show? And vice versa, are there things that you could do in a book or a television show maybe that you could never get away with in a video game?
That is a really great question, and they are very different media. I think the luxury that people who tell stories in film and TV are, if someone sits down to watch your show, you're pretty sure they're going to watch it in the proper order. I have no such guarantee when people sit down to play my game. Like, the player has free will, and they can play it out of order, and they can just ignore very important moments that you've set up for them to do. They can skip the cutscenes. Like, you really have to be very good at getting information to the player in a way as efficiently as possible, as quickly as possible, and ideally as entertainingly as possible, so that they want to pay attention to your story and they get hooked into it and want to know more. But games can also do things that film and TV cannot, and I think there are a few games that really have done some remarkable things. There's a game called Brothers, Tale of Two Sons.
I was going to bring this up when you were like, hard
Yeah.
choices, and I'm like, are you going to make me that's a spoiler. We can't leave that in there. I love that game so much. I have not been able to go back. I know that there's a bunch that I missed, but the end of that game was such trauma that I have not been back.
But without giving too much away, you are playing as two brothers. You're playing one on one joystick and another brother on the other one. And through the whole game, you're learning how to move them together and navigate this landscape and make all of these, solve these puzzles together. And by just when you're getting really good at it, something happens. And the way you feel when this thing happens, because you feel it physically, you feel it viscerally, because there's an actual physical adjustment you have to make. And so this game allows you to feel the emotion of the moment on a level that films and TV absolutely cannot. You feel it in your gut, in your body. And that is the power of games. And that for me is like the holy grail, is finding those moments where games do something that no other medium can do.
That game is so good. I made somebody play it, and I was like, you're going to get to the end, and you're going to be mad at me.
It's really traumatic.
It's
I
really
played the one section where it actually, the thing happens, like over and over again, trying to find a way around it. I'm like, there's no way they wouldn't give me a choice, right? There's no way they would just do this. I'm like, I did something wrong, right? Kept trying to make it not happen, but it happens.
And we got to the lake, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do now?
That is such a powerful moment, though, like when you figure out how to do it, right?
Anna McGill, are you playing anything right now that you are particularly fond of that you did not yourself write?
So I just moved and my consoles are all packed, but I am waiting there's going to be an update to Stardew Valley soon, and, the 1.7 patch, and I am waiting for that to come. I did just download or pre-order, I guess I should say, Kiln from Double Fine. I don't know. Yeah. It's like you make these pots yourself, and then you have, it's basically a brawler, a squad brawler, and you try to crack each other and break each other's pots. It looks very fun and very silly.
It's a very Double Fine sort of thing to do.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
one of those companies that's really trying to innovate what we play with, how we play with it, and they've done that over the course of their entire tenure.
With a delightful whimsy too. Like the game before that, it was called Keeper. It was about a sentient lighthouse that goes on a journey. I mean, they're just really sort of pushing the envelope of storytelling in some ways. It's really fun stuff.
Well, you can learn about storytelling for video games tomorrow, April 15th, at Smith College, the alma mater of Anna McGill, who will be hosting the talk, Writing for Video Games. It's not just for bips and boops anymore, although sometimes it is fun to play with those old bips and boops ones, but other times it's wonderful to get immersed in a story that will captivate you, that you get to control and explore. That's what makes video games so much fun.
Why farming games are so fun, because there's automatically story.
Yeah, or you can, like I said, drop out of school and read all the books of the Library of Mist and not read your history book. Anna McGill, thank you so much for coming back to Smith and for sharing your insights and knowledge with us.
Thank you for having me. This was really fun.
Anna McGill's talk is at 5 p.m. tomorrow, the 15th, on Smith campus. Do a quick search for her name, MEGILL, and it'll pop right up. Thank you so much to her for talking with us. We'll learn more about Parent Village's upcoming Education Matters brunch with the organization's founder, Latanya Monroe-Naylor.
After we see the connection between goats and one woman's midlife crisis upheavals in the pages of Jennifer Acker's latest novel, Surrender, whose release is being celebrated in South Hadley at the Odyssey Bookshop tonight.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar in Hatfield, offering personalized solar energy solutions and ongoing customer care, proudly serving communities throughout the Pioneer Valley. Northeast-solar.com.
A woman retreats from academic life in New York City to manage a family goat farm in New England and falls unexpectedly in love, is how the book is summarized. But of course, this book is so much more.
Surrender is a new book out today, a novel that Richard Russo calls splendid, providing what I crave from all stories: vividly drawn characters worth spending time with and richly rendered place.
The author is Jennifer Acker. She is founder and editor-in-chief of the global award-winning literary magazine based out of Amherst College called The Common. Her debut novel, The Limits of the World, was a finalist for the Massachusetts Book Award. Her memoir, Fatigue, is a #1 Amazon bestseller, and her short stories, essays, translations, and reviews have appeared in the Wall Street Journal, Oprah Daily, The Washington Post, Literary Hub, N+1, Slate, and Poets and Writers, amongst many other places.
Acker has an MFA from the Bennington Writers Seminars and a BA from Amherst College, where she directs the literary publishing internship and the Amherst College Lit Fest. She lives in Montague and Portland, Maine. Her second novel is this one, Surrender, which is in stores today.
Jennifer will be at the Odyssey Bookshop in South Hadley presenting Surrender in conversation with author Emily Everett. And Jennifer, welcome back to the Fabulous 413.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be back.
We got the pitch from this and we're like, goat farms? Yeah, absolutely. Send us this book.
Plus, we know you and we like talking to you about the Amherst Lit Fest, so we're really glad when you yourself can put some lit into the world, and this is exactly what you've done with Surrender. First of all, I had the book on my kitchen table. My wife was like, it's a beautiful cover. It's pink with all these hot pink goats on the front.
Yes. Speaking...
That's how we draw you in, the hot pink goats.
It's the late you can judge a book by its cover sometimes.
Speaking of how the goats appear in the book outside of your beautiful prose, talk about the chapters that got named for seasons versus the ones that didn't. It kind of drives the timeline of the story a bit, but there's times when they don't get named.
I'm glad you liked some of those headings. It is a seasonal book, and it takes place basically over the course of a year. So it was important to me that because a farmer's life is marked by the seasons, that the book also proceed in a way that makes sense for that character. And so we start with hibernation season, and that takes place in the middle of the winter and sort of gearing up for the birth of the kids, of the baby goats, and then spin all the way through until the next kidding season. So it takes place over a little more than a year, in which many, many things happen. But those headers that you were talking about, I envision more as like section headings, so that all the chapters that follow that heading are taking place within that season.
I want to talk about the goats and the actual farming that is in this, because there is an awful lot. And the farmers farmers, even locally, who you worked with to do the research. But that is only the kind of the subtext of the story to a certain degree. It really is a story about love and loss and care and land. So tell me what the impetus was for wanting to tell this story. I know you did grow up on a farm in Maine, right? So there is some of that in your blood. But what made you want to tell this story about a woman who has a husband who's much older, who is at the end of life? It's about end of life care, and it's about reigniting new love that maybe you never even knew was there in the first place.
Yeah, so there were a couple of considerations that went into this book. I wanted to write a small town novel. My first book was very international. It was global. It takes place in Nairobi and India and the US, and with lots of immigration. And it was lots of research into places that I had been to and I was familiar with, but they weren't sort of part of me in a more intimate way or part of my daily life. And so when I finished that book, I said, I'm going to write a small town novel, like something that I really intimately know. I grew up in this small town in Maine. I live in Montague. So thinking about that scenario about small towns, I think I started wanting to write about a farmer after my dad died. My dad died a couple of years ago when we sold the farm that I grew up in. And we ended up selling to a woman who was a goat farmer who made cheese. And I just sort of thought, what would that life have been like if we hadn't sold the farm, but I had inherited it and I had decided to take it over, what would that have looked like? And so that's sort of where the farming angle came from, like a little bit of regret mixed with wish fulfillment, mixed with the normal imagination that goes into writing a novel. And then also, I'm in my 40s. I'm thinking about, midlife crises and, what happens to people when they make big changes in the middle of their lives. Not everything that happens in the book are things that I would have chose to have done myself, but I could imagine that somebody would make some of these dramatic changes. That's where those two threads came from.
There is some sexy imagination in the book as well. I'll just throw that out there.
As there should be.
Yes.
Did you learn anything new about goats in your research and going to the farms in Maine and to Damas Dairy, where we have also been?
Yeah.
It's a delightful place. I nearly stole a kid.
Yes, Khalees, 3 years ago now, almost stole one of Lori Cuevas's kids, and Lori is in the acknowledgments here. God rest their big ox that just passed away, the Guinness Book of World Record, biggest ox. But yeah, talk to us about the goats.
I mean, who doesn't love goats? They are just so much fun. I have loved them for a long time. And, people used to give me goat gifts and goat calendars. And, long before I even really got into the research for this novel. But I thought, I get to write about goats. Like, how much fun is that? Doing the research was pure joy, visiting Lori and learning about her goats. But they're really fascinating animals. Many of the things that struck me are just how curious and intelligent they are and how different their personalities are. Like they really all have different personalities. Like we think of dogs having personalities, but we are often not that close to farm animals to think of them being individuated in that way. And so that was a really important part of the book to get across, is that when you do care for animals in that way, you name them, you recognize them, you know their tendencies, you know what they're like. One fun fact is goats sort of recognize each other vocally, and they can have sort of similar vocal registers to those in their birth group. So if they were raised with another group of kids, and say there are two sisters, goat sisters, that have kids at the same time, that those goat cousins could sort of have similar vocal stamps in a way and learn to sort of recognize each other, which I just thought was fascinating. And, all of these things that we think of as being characteristics of, maybe just of primates or of humans also apply to other animals.
You named one of the goats Derek Jeter, and lots of goats die in this book, and not Derek Jeter.
Well, Derek Jeter is also a jerk.
So I guess I'm okay with that.
On both ends.
Have a little bit of humor.
Both the goat in this book, Derek Jeter.
Well, Red Sox fans like to say Derek Jeter's a class act, as opposed to A-Rod, who we still hate with a vicious passion.
Fair enough.
We're speaking with Jennifer Acker, who lives in Montague, despite having a goat named Derek Jeter in her new book, Surrender, which is in stores today. Jennifer will be at the Odyssey Bookshop in South Hadley tonight. South Hadley is not a named town in here, but Greenfield is, Hadley is. There's lots of towns locally that are named here, but not the town where your main character, Lucy, is situated. Why did you decide not to situate Lucy in a real Western Massachusetts town? And why did you go with the name name of the town, which I'm saying Eden, but it's written, I don't know, how would you pronounce it? I didn't get the audiobook version of it.
It's just spelled differently. It's Edin, but it's Eden. Yeah, obviously a play on paradise. I did not want to write, call it Monty, because I didn't want to be held to exacting standards of whether everything was exactly right. So the place is sort of a mishmash of the town that I grew up in and Montague and other small towns that I know. So it is very recognizably Western Mass, as you say, with those other surrounding towns being mentioned. But I didn't want my neighbors to hate me for getting something wrong or for like deviating from the truth a little bit. And they're saying, that's not where my house is. It's actually like 200 feet down the road. I decided to give myself a little bit of license.
Well, speaking of neighbors hating you, that is another theme of the book, because it has to do with land and farmland and the value of farmland, what it's worth, and the siting of solar, which is a real issue that we have been dealing with in Western Massachusetts and beyond, about should solar be sited on farmlands. That is a main tenet of the book. Is this something that you personally have been wrestling with the community, or something that you just thought was an interesting piece of the puzzle to add?
That's really ripped from the headlines. Like, as you say, it's such a big issue here in Western Mass, and something that I'm reading about all the time in the Greenfield Recorder and the Montague Reporter. I know all of our local papers are covering this. And I think it opened my eyes to what some of the issues are. And so I went in thinking, of course we need more renewable energy, and of course we need solar panels, but there are some complicated issues in terms of land use that go with that. And so I was just trying to sort of present the debate realistically in a way that was recognizable and that people would understand. And we're in such a climate crisis. We have to do something, and communities have to make hard decisions about which direction they're going to go in.
Can you talk about Lucy and her impetus to do things, like her relationship with decisions she makes for herself and decisions she's not aware she's making for herself, which I think is a really important crux in this novel, and why her age might be important to that.
I hear you skirting around some major plot points here.
I'm trying really hard to be subtle about this in a way that still makes people interested in reading this book, because it's a fun book to read. Yeah,
it's a borderline midlife crisis / self-sabotage story.
Yes, for sure.
And it's not lost on me that one of the first things you read when you open the book is the quote from the Gillian Welch song, "Look at Miss Ohio. I want to do right, but not right now."
I think Lucy, like all of us, is a complicated character with a lot of tough choices ahead of us, and so she ends up in these positions where she is passionately pursuing what she wants, but she also has obligations to those she loves. And so the caring for the farm and growing the farm is often in tension with maybe pursuing this new relationship that appears on the horizon, or taking care of her husband, her much older husband, who is having some health problems. So she wants to do right by everyone, including herself. Like, the whole reason that she moved back to the farm was to be a farmer. And that's a very absorbing, all-encompassing, demanding life, both in terms of her time and money. And so it leaves her with some very difficult choices about the other meaningful relationships in her life. And I think that's what life is that we have these really tough choices where, we need to care for our aging spouse, but we also have, our own self-actualization that we want to pursue. And those decisions are just incredibly painful. But I think any of us who have cared for someone who is ill, or had a parent die, or a caretaker in any way, or even caring for small children, I think we'll recognize that dilemma.
Can we also talk about birth as the frame for this story? Because it starts with birthing and it ends with birthing. And then in the middle, a whole lot of things happen, but there's death throughout. There's birth at the beginning and the end, but none of those births belong to any of the main human characters.
Yeah, you're not kidding. No, I mean, actually, you are kidding.
Badoom cha. There's lots of kidding.
There's goats. This is a goat story.
Well, I think it's part of that seasonal cycle of life, like the same impetus for naming the seasons in such a way and tracking those aspects of a farmer's life. It just made so much intimate sense that when, you're writing about a farmer and dealing with animals, and what you're doing is breeding animals for the milk so that you can sell the milk and make cheese, and those are all just a cycle of life. So it's intimately related to the business aspect of farming, but it also is, sort of grandly metaphorical, right? The idea of beginning and ending with birth and new beginnings, and using that as a way to work through some of the more difficult aspects of life, maybe.
There's also a parallel about the relationship aspect of it, the relationship between Lucy and Sandy, two of your main characters in the book, where what is the value of a relationship and a communication? What are we looking for out of this relationship? And also a parallel with the land itself. Is the land an asset that money should be reaped from, or is the land some sort of nourishment for the human soul or the soul of the community? Talk about that perspective on land that you bring into your new book, Surrender, which is in stores today, Jennifer Acker.
Yes, well, as we mentioned, I did grow up on a small family farm in Maine, and so I was very connected to that land that I grew up on, and was, exploring it as a kid and with my parents, and going out into the woods with my dad from a young age. And I just thinking the land was extremely important to him. Like, he devoted so much time into sort of cultivating it and wanting to do that because it would make him, not only because of the things that it produces, but because of how it made him feel to have that attachment, to be able to grow things. And so I always think of that as being a part of a farmer's life. It is not just the connection to the animals, but that feeling of responsibility towards the land. And as we live in an era of increasing development, and farms being turned under for condominiums and other kinds of housing, not that we don't desperately need housing, because we do, but there is also this tension with wanting to preserve open space for the good of the community. And I do think that people in Western Mass are particularly attuned to that, the value of the land. And there are wonderful conservation organizations here, and people that are really trying to preserve the land. And then, on the other side, not just preserving it to be open space, but helping farmers pursue their businesses, helping farms to be more viable. But I do think, especially to those of us who live out here, we feel very attached to this area, in part because of the natural beauty and that attachment to the land. And so it just seemed very reminiscent, not only of this area, but of the people in the book.
We're speaking with Jennifer Acker, who will be at the Odyssey Bookshop in South Hadley tonight. Her brand new book is in stores today. It is called Surrender.
Another part of this book that I found really interesting is that, like, for all that this is about the land and conserving the land and connecting with it, there's this really interesting thread of displacement amongst your main four women characters, and maybe even a little bit beyond. Like, you've got Gloria and Betty, who are displaced by Maria and end up in Western Mass.
From Puerto Rico, from the Hurricane Maria.
Right.
Not from another character named
not
Maria.
From another character. No. Hurricane Maria. And Lucy herself, who's uprooted herself to come back home. Sandy, who's kind of done the same. And Shruti, who is in the middle of her own tumult. And you kind of get to wrap this up with a little bow later on in the book, and we won't get into it, but the ways that each of them kind of come to Eden and find new ways to make new community, I thought was really interesting. Talk about the aspect of trying to create home away from home in your book.
Thank you for that question. Yeah, I think community is something that I think about a lot in my professional life, my personal life. And again, sort of an aspect of living out here in Western Mass, you have the opportunity to create those communities. I also think that when we are in this sort of midlife stage, community becomes both more important and a little more fraught, because everyone is so busy, and there are people who are, caretaking small children, caretaking parents, working really hard at their jobs. And where is the time for friends? Like, where is the time for that, or giving back to your community, or sort of feeling that close-knitness that I think a lot of us crave. And so I think it's this fundamental human need, and we are all really searching for ways to achieve that. So Lucy is farming, but she also wants a community. Farming can be kind of isolating, and her friends become very important to her. And it is interesting that that so many of them have been displaced, and so this idea that they would really need to make an effort to reach out to each other and form that kind of intentional community is again, I think, something that I think a lot about, and I have a lot of female friends who are thinking about that at this stage of life also.
Yeah, I think it's important that the main crux of this is a women's story, women supporting women, women trying to figure themselves out. The men are almost, the very few that are in the book are certainly secondary, it seems. And I wonder if you asked...
Who needs them?
I wonder if you asked the Weinzick family for permission to use their name, because one of the heels of the story is named Weinzick, which is a popular or familiar name to people who live in Western Mass.
I really hope I didn't offend anyone. I was just trying to come up with a Polish name, because that is a very common name in this area, so it would be sort of recognizable to the area. But I have no personal animus towards anyone in that family.
That's good to know. And I'll just say, if you are a Weinzick and you read this book, please read it all the way to the end. That's all I'll say. I don't want to ruin anything else.
There's redemption for everyone.
Read it all the way to the end.
I'm going to say I love the choice to not translate at points in this novel. I love when that happens. It wasn't an issue for me because I speak most of the languages that were used, but I think it's really cool for like explaining connection in a way that is novel. And I think I've figured out how to ask the question I want to ask without spoiling things.
Aha.
Can you talk about the difference between caring and doing for?
Yeah, that is a major theme of the book. I think when you care for someone, you are recognizing their autonomy in an important way, that you are supporting them, but that their aims are kept in mind, that the things that are important to them become important to you. And when you are sort of doing for someone, you are maybe assuming what they need done and what would be good for them, and going ahead and doing it without a conversation about whether that would actually be helpful or useful to them.
Enough said. Well done. Neither of you spoiled what happens in this book, but it is a wonderful book. Like when I felt like a sadness when I flipped the last page. Like I was wearing a cozy goat skin blanket, and then I had to let it go. It is a book that does have a lot to do with goats. It's called Surrender by Jennifer Acker, who grew up on a farm in Maine and now lives in Montague. Do you currently have any goats in Montague?
Oh, if only.
You know so much about them now. You should.
I mean, Montague's at least right to farm. I can't have goats in Springfield.
Yeah,
I would in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
I know. If we live, right in Montague Center and just have no land, it would, unless we could have them in the house, which I have broached that subject, but there's not really a big appetite for that anyway. Who wants to clean up after goats in the house?
Exactly.
So really not an option. I'm just going to have to visit Thomas Farm with all of my available weekends.
Or you can visit the imaginary goats in Surrender. They're a lot cleaner.
Sure, you do not have to clean up after them.
Jennifer Acker is behind the literary publishing internship at Amherst College and the Lit Fest at Amherst College, an acclaimed author in her own right, and her new book is out in stores today. It's a fun read. If you're from Western Mass, you're going to, I think in particular, love this book. It's called Surrender, and Jennifer will be at the Odyssey Bookshop in South Hadley tonight in conversation with author Emily Everett. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
She says I want to do right.
And she'll be at the Odyssey Bookshop at 6 p.m. because time is sometimes important to people. Thanks again, Jennifer Acker, for talking with us. That book is lovely.
Now to hear about the intergenerational work of Parent Villages and how you can celebrate with their Education Matters brunch on April 18th with the organizers, President and CEO, Latonia Monroe Naylor.
You're listening to The Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM. Welcome back to The Fabulous 413. Parent Villages provides education through 2 generational programs dedicated to nurturing families impacted by violence and trauma. Their vision is to close the belief gap that has infiltrated the minds of children that they cannot go beyond what they see. They do this by leveraging key partnerships, mentoring families, and financially investing in our youth via the Education Matters Scholarship.
Founded in February 2018, Parent Villages is an initiative-turned program that has brought hundreds of people together to discuss all aspects of education. Their focal point is to build bridges between the community and those who make decisions about our communities. They work together with families, communities, and partner organizations to improve communication channels, policies, and structures that directly impact the quality of education and lives of all children in Greater Springfield and Western Massachusetts.
And this Saturday, April 18th at 10, they'll host their 8th annual Education Matters brunch dedicated to honoring community members whose leadership, service, and commitment continue to make this education matter.
We're joined by Latonia Monroe-Naylor. Latonia Monroe-Naylor is a lifelong Springfield resident and an accomplished nonprofit and business leader with a long-standing commitment to supporting youth, families, and community-based organizations. She's a graduate of Elms College and Bay Path University, a published author with a strong background in nonprofit management, financial oversight, and trauma-informed, culturally responsive leadership. She's also served on the Springfield School Committee since January 2018 and is the president, CEO, and co-founder of Parent Villages. Also, I'll add our neighbor, literally and figuratively, 32 Hamden Street, Springfield, and we're at 44, literally right next door. Thanks for coming down the street.
Thanks for making the long trip over.
I know, it was such a trip. It was so funny. I was waiting to come in, and I'm like, I could have literally waited and walked out of my office 2 minutes.
Yeah. It's not as it's only about 2 minutes further from the green room to here as it is from Parent Villages to here.
I got a lot done though. I got to take care of some things.
Now, if my timeline is correct, you both decided to found Parent Villages and run for school committee in the same year?
No, so this is actually a little bit different. So I have been on school committee, I hate to admit, but I am going to my 9th year.
Okay.
She is on her first year of school committee. You talking about Ayana?
No, I'm talking about
you.
Didn't you run for school committee in 2018 and found Parent Villages in 2018?
Okay. So I'm thinking about Ayana.
Congratulations,
my co-founder.
Ayana. She has been on the show many times, and it was recently sworn into school committee in Springfield this year.
Yes. So I'm thinking about when you said co-founder, I have to. So one of the co-founders is my mom, and if I don't mention her when we talk about co-founders, she gets the whole vibe going. So
I get it.
I have to mention Paige Monroe, co-founder.
It is Parent Villages after all.
Absolutely. And then Cindy Gaynor Harper, who's another co-founder, and then Ayana Crawford, and of course myself. And so yes, I won school committee and literally sat in a meeting. The first meeting that I had, there was a presentation about kindergarten readiness. And Laura Menz, who is now a friend of mine, she was giving us all this information, and she said 7% of our kids were ready for kindergarten. And I sat there and I'm like, 7, you're right. Can't possibly be 7. And after I said, 70? She said, no, 7. I said, so 93% of our kids are not ready for kindergarten? And she said, yeah. And I was just floored. And so I went back to the women that I mentioned earlier, and I said, we have to do something. And they're like, what? I don't know. We got to go, talk to people. And they're like, well, yeah, let's do these town halls. And I said, yeah, let's call it Parent Villages. And literally, it started out as this conversation with parents to talk about kindergarten readiness, and it morphed into what you know it to be today, this beautiful nonprofit center where we're helping so many folks now, hundreds of families a year, and working with the other nonprofits as well to support the families along the spectrum. And the Education Matters is really a key component of it because it's what started the work, but it's also the thing that keeps us grounded in why we need to do the work to support our young people moving forward.
And that support of young people is important and definitely the drive of this. But talk about what parents get out of this too, because the point of this is that it's intergenerational learning for a younger generation to really benefit from. But the parents get benefit too.
Absolutely. So the easiest benefit that we see for parents at Education Matters is that we now have a parent scholarship. So we started this a few years ago, and we give a $2,500 scholarship out to a parent who's gone back to school, doing the hard work, doing the things that they're supposed to do every day, and they just need a little bit of encouragement. And who wants to not have a scholarship? So we thought that would be a way to invest. But the other way is that we work with our parents and our young people doing all kind of workshops, educational programming, interim support services. So we really prioritize folks who have been affected by violence and trauma. 90% of our folks have been affected by violence or trauma. It's not necessarily, unlike most organizations around here, they'll look at, okay, what's your income level? We don't look at that. We don't even know what the income level is of most of our families, except to say they live here in the city of Springfield, and we know what those statistics are. But outside of that, we look at, have you been affected by violence or trauma? And the point is that over 90% of the people that live in our city have in some way or shape or form. And so when we bring folks together in a room, we're talking about how do you empower yourself? What does effective communication look like? What does agency look like? Not just for yourself, but for your children. And we do fellowship programming, advocacy services. We do all these things to teach not just our young people how to be leaders, but also our parents. Like, how do you lead in a way that's going to command the room so that when you step there, somebody's going to say, how can I help you serve your child? And that's what we've been doing for the last 8 years.
How does it work? So is it an after-school program? Is it during the school day? How do people get involved?
I love the way you asked that question. There's so many ways that you can get involved with Parent Villages. And I remember talking to a funder in the very beginning, and she was like, this is never going to work. You're doing too much. And I said, no, it has to work. She's like, why do you know? I said, because I lived it. I know this is what it takes for us to help our families. And we found a model, the 2Gen model by the Ascend Institute. And so what that model says is that if you engage families 2 generations at a time, you're going to see long-term transformation and sustainability. And so we stepped back for a second. We said to the audience, like, what do you need? Because we can tell people all day what we think they need, but they'll tell us better if we ask. And so we did. And they said, well, we want workshops. We want to get trained. We want to understand how to advocate for our children. We want to understand, what does the pipeline look like for us to have these conversations? Oh, by the way, our kids, they want to know how to cook, or they want to know how to be entrepreneurs, or they want to know how to have conversations with leaders and, state legislatures and all of those kinds of things, right? And so we literally sat down and said, okay, how do we create programming in a way that provides an educational component, not necessarily only academic, but from the sense of folks learning and growing, and how do we do it in a way that they're going to stay engaged and meet them at their trauma? And so we have a program clinician who feeds, to us exactly how to do it in a way that's trauma informed. And from there, we do the workshops, and we bring them in for cohorts where they'll be with us for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, or sometimes longer. We have a cohort of young people, like next week, they'll be coming for the boot camp that happens during the school breaks, and it's for 3 days, So it's not a one size fits all model, because everybody is different in their levels. If somebody's coming from a homeless situation, they're not going to be ready to sit in a workshop for 3 months, but they can work towards that. And so one success story that I always like to share is we had a parent who came in, and she was living out of her car. And by the time she finished working with us over the course of a year, not only was she not living in a car anymore, she also is now going to get her master's degree. She graduated, finally went back to school, got her bachelor's, and now she's getting ready to work on her master's. That would have never happened if she didn't have a village. But by the way, her daughter also works in the programs and comes to us and is able to get what she needs to be supported and to be a leader as well.
It's amazing. It's Parent Villages, and we're speaking with the CEO and one of the co-founders, Latonia Monroe Naylor. There is a Education Matters fundraising brunch this Saturday with awards that they are hosting.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the people that are being honored at this brunch on Saturday, because I like, just in a quick glance, I recognize one name.
I recognize several of the names, but these are some real stalwarts of the Springfield
one that we bring
area.
up a lot.
Yeah, Liz Ogilvie from Gardening the Community, our dear friend and a
local superhero.
Hunger justice superhero, yes.
We had to honor Gardening the Community for so many reasons. Number one of the co-founders was a really good friend of mine, Ruby Maddox, and we just wanted to honor her legacy, and Liz is amazing, so you get a 2 for 1. We also have Dr. Tyra Good, who's at Elms College. Phenomenal rock star. And then we have Lady Stephanie Roberson, who is from Fresh Anointing Church of God in Christ. She does this annual scholarship brunch to honor women every year. And we're like, she needs to be honored for all the ways that she's honored other people. We have Assistant Superintendent, she's not the Assistant Superintendent yet. Let me stop.
Spoiler alert.
Assistant Principal. She's going to get me. She's like, I'm not ready for that. Kinjo Tinson at Putnam Academy. And then we have our Educator in Action, Patricia Webb, and Eleni Yalanis, she's got the Community Impact Award. She's from Community Music School. Phenomenal work. And I cannot say enough about this last one. Our Prestige Legacy honoree, Dr. Frank Robinson. He has been an advocate of the work we've done in so many different organizations for decades. And this is the fun fact about this. His wife was one of our honorees as well. So the late, great Dora Robinson, she's not here anymore with us in the flesh, but her spirit continues to live on through our work. And we were so excited to honor him on this year.
It is the Education Matters Brunch. It's happening this Saturday at 10, their 8th annual fundraiser for Parent Villages. You are a school committee member. You're the vice chair of the school committee right now. In the minute we have left, have you, as a school committee member who's been at the helm of this organization for as long as you've been a school committee member, seen that 7% increase or seen any bumps that you can...
It has increased.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that success story.
Absolutely. So we don't measure it the same way that we used to, but what we do know is that our kids are reading more and that they're better prepared, and mostly because we were able to advocate alongside the folks here in the district for universal preschool. And when we were able to make that transition, that alone was one of the biggest factors in making sure that our kids are ready for kindergarten. So we're still not at 100%, but we're definitely a lot closer than we were, and much further beyond that 7%.
Not to mention the stability that it introduces when, like, somebody's got a place to put their kids and it doesn't necessarily have to be childcare.
Yeah, when you're working together with your kid in this endeavor,
Yes.
it seems like a very winning strategy, and that's what Parent Villages is all about. Does it come from It Takes a Village to Raise a Child? Is that the name of it, or
Well, you know what? It's the concept.
Yeah.
It's the framework that it does take a village. And you all know, we work many a days with sharing our young people with you all and
Yes.
engaging
Yeah.
as
And our
partners.
Media Lab
I was
program,
going to
we had-
mention
Yes.
we just
we had
had
some of them on
yeah.
2 weeks ago, I
It's
think. Yeah.
amazing stuff. And so we can't do this in an island. We all do this together. When we work together, it does take a village, and it does transform our communities one family at a time.
Latonia Monroe Naylor, who is the CEO and co-founder of Parent Villages, as well as the vice chair of the Springfield School Committee. The fundraising event for the Education Matters Brunch and Awards is this Saturday at 10. You can go to their website and find out all the details on that, parentvillages.org. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're doing inspiring work over there next door.
Sure are.
On the next Fabulous 413, we'll meet some of the team behind the upcoming Acting Class 2 Too Fast, Too Furious, a raucous drag-based performance in East Hampton featuring Dame Judi Dentures.
And microgreens and more at Dusty Goat Farm in East Longmeadow.
Plus deep-seated eggcorns with word nerd Emily Brewster.
If you have a question for our word nerd, you can email us, thefab413@nepm.org. I'm Monty Belmonte.
I'm Clee Smith. We'll talk to you tomorrow on Fabulous 413.